right, looks like we're rolling here. Okay, well, first off, thank you for joining us today. It's great to see some people that I recognize. We have quite a few of our team members here too, who you'll get to meet in just a little bit. And because we have kind of a small group, I wonder if it would be okay to do some quick introductions from our coaches. Some of you may know each other already. And you will definitely meet our team members in just a second. So if that's okay, I may just call on people. I'm going to look alphabetically down our list. And if you just want to say a quick hello, where you are, where you teach, and I guess what's your experience with Science Olympiad, whether you're brand new or one of our veterans. So I'm going to start. Let's see. Heidi, you're first alphabetically. If you are able to say hi, or that would be awesome. Just introduce yourself and where you are and what's your experience with Science Olympiad.
Hi, I'm Heidi Schuster. I am from Hardin Middle School. I have been a coach for the Science Olympiad for about 7 years. I'm currently at home sick, so you're not going to see me.
Okay, well, it's good
You're not
to
going to see my
kind
face.
of see you, Heidi. Thanks for being a coach.
Yeah.
Um, let's go. I'm going to skip over Jeannie. You'll meet her in a second. Let's go to Lynette.
I'm Lynette Johnson, and I teach at Flathead High School in Kalispell. And we took a team to the Science Olympiad for the first time last year. And we're
Awesome. I'm
hoping to
glad
have
you're.
a bigger team and um, understand the rules better, do better.
Yeah, awesome. It's great to have you here
Thank
today.
you.
Cool. And then this is Paul Harmon. I'm going to guess that might be Diana.
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to change it, and I don't know how to
That's
change
all right. I guessed.
it. Good guess. Oh, so I coach the homeschool team in the Helena area, and this is our fourth, maybe fifth year. I can't remember. So
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for being here. Sarah is next. Sorry to put you on the spot there and get your tech stuff ready. You're quiet, Sarah. Maybe I'll go to Stephanie real quickly and then circle back to you while you get your headphones. Sorry about that. Stephanie, we're just saying hi, introducing ourselves, where you coach, and what's your experience with Science Olympiad.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm in Hamilton, and I've been coaching the middle school team for 9 years.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
And let's go to Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Hafley. I also coach at Hamilton. I'm at the high school though, so I have the Division C kids. This is only my second year as head coach at Hamilton, but I coached for 9 years at Florence before that.
Awesome, cool. Thanks for being here. Let's circle back to Sarah. You're still quiet. Well, no worries, Sarah. If you want to say hi in the chat, that'd be great. And we'll have some time at the end too. This is a pretty small group and it's meant to be interactive. We're going to share some material with you and then leave time for questions at the end. It sounds like everybody here has some experience with Science Olympiad. Nobody's brand new, but what I'll do is stay on at the very end. And typically I do a presentation about kind of why you might want to start a Science Olympiad team, what's the benefit to your students and to you as a coach and a teacher. I think since most people are pretty familiar with this, I'll probably not do that part, but if anybody wants to talk over that at the end, we can definitely do that. Awesome. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here and let you know what we have planned for today. So here's our agenda. I'm going to introduce you to the members of our team. We have a couple new people I don't think you've met before. We're going to talk a little bit about the events for the year, and that will be a good time to ask any specific questions about the events. We're going to talk about some new ways that we can support you as coaches. Certainly a reminder to register your team if you haven't already. There's not a hard and fast deadline, but the sooner you can register, the better it helps us plan for the season. So we'll make sure to help you know what those links are. So I want to introduce you to our team. So I'm Susie Taylor. I think this will be my 4th Science Olympiad. I was there in 2019 for our last live tournament before COVID hit. We had some weird ones in there, and now we're hopefully back on track. Dr. Fengchen Lao is our Associate Director. She's actually teaching right now, so she was not able to make it today. Jill Joyce is our brand new program coordinator. Some of you might remember Asan Salam. He was our program coordinator for many years. Asan moved away to Oklahoma. So Jill has just started with us. She will be your primary contact for registering the team, making payments, general questions about the tournament schedule and logistics. And then Jill will help channel those questions out to all the rest of us. In just a moment, you're going to meet 2 other members of our team. They're going to be pretty involved in the coach support, so I'm going to save them for just a minute and move into a little bit more of our logistics. So I wanted to start with some of the ways that I see coaches maybe stumbling or having questions. For those of you who have been doing this for a while, these probably won't be that huge, but these seem to be the things where people get tripped up. So the first reminder is that in Montana, we don't host all the events that you will find in the national rule book. In the national rules, there are 23 events for middle school and 23 events for high school. In Montana, we host just 14 of those. So invariably, every year, it's really sad. I'll see some kids come with something they've built for a contest that we're not actually hosting in Montana, or they've prepared for one of the contests that is not on our slate for the year. So definitely make sure your kids have looked at the Montana website and know the 14 events that we're hosting in each of the categories. I also wanted to mention that teams can only put, so your school can only put 1 team of kids into an event. For instance, we're doing a bridge contest this year. If you have a team of 15 students, you can only bring 1 bridge. We had one year a school that had, I think, 6 different kids who were trying to enter the same event. I felt really bad because they just didn't know how that works. But basically, you can just enter each event 1 time. If you have multiple teams, like a junior varsity and a varsity, and I know at least one of your schools will have that, then of course you can enter, the varsity team can bring a bridge and the JV team can bring a bridge, but the students who are on the team stay on that team. So basically, if you're a varsity team member, you're always a varsity team member, and the points for all of those students go into the team points for varsity. I know that's a little bit confusing. We can talk about that a little bit more if you have questions about that. I also wanted to make sure that your students know to really read those rules manuals, and especially to look at what materials they can bring with them into the contest. It varies by every contest. Sometimes it's a single piece of paper front and back. Sometimes they can bring an entire binder. Sometimes they can bring a field guide, but they just need to be really clear and not bring more than they're allowed to bring into the contest. Rules clarifications come out all the time. Those are coming from the national level as people read and interpret the rules, and you will find those on the national website. So be sure that you and your students are kind of checking in on that all the time, because they seem to filter in all throughout the season. Sometimes there are questions very specifically about the Montana events, and we post those on our events page on the Montana Science Olympiad website. We also have a frequently asked questions page, and when questions come up, such as any that might come up today, we'll post the answers there too. I wanted to remind everybody that if you are ordering any of the wards kits or supplies, there's a discount code on the inside cover of the rules manual. Of course, you don't have to buy any of those materials, but if you do, you might as well get the discount. I also wanted to remind you about MySO, My Science Olympiad. That's a national program that was invented during COVID for students who are learning at home. but they've continued to keep that program going, and it has excellent resources for all the events that are running. I believe the last month was forestry, and so they had different presentations, lesson plans, and activities all about those events. Double Good is the official popcorn fundraiser of National Science Olympiad. If that's something your team would like to take on, it seems like a pretty good fundraiser. It's all virtual. They mail the popcorn right to the people who buy. And then lastly, just another mention of the national webpage. In fact, this is so important, I made a screenshot of it. I continue to find new resources on the site that I didn't know were there. And the red arrow is pointing to this green menu button in the upper left-hand corner of the National Science Olympiad website. There's so many resources there that I do hope you will take a look, and you might challenge your students to see what they can find and share that with the other members of the team. I think the last thing I wanted to mention before I turn it over to Jeannie is the date. In fact, I'm gonna stop sharing here. And I did just want to mention some of the challenges we had with picking a date this year. Those of you who have been around Science Olympiad for a while know that we used to do it on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. That worked out really well because campus was a little bit quieter, but we still had people around. Now MSU has made that entire week a holiday. And so we don't have our students, we don't have our faculty, and we just had to move. It's really hard to get space at MSU these days. I don't know if anybody's been on campus lately, but it's just bursting at the seams. And so basically we had about half a dozen options, and we picked the one that seemed to work the best. I know there's going to be conflicts for people. There's a music event to my understanding. There's a Class C basketball tournament starting. So I do acknowledge the pressure that that puts on the coaches. And what we're going to try to do is start working several years ahead so we can lock in the very best dates for 2024, 2025, and let you know those ahead of time. So I think that's it for me. From here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Jeannie Chips. Some of you may have met Jeannie before in some of our online presentations, but she's going to take it from here and share her perspectives as a former Science Olympiad coach.
I may have seen some of you.
You're quiet, Jeannie.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, and I can drive the slides for you if you let me know when you're ready.
You can go ahead and start sharing then.
Okay, sounds good.
I apologize. I am getting over all colds. Hit so many people I know across the United States. Somehow we all transferred it through phone because I'm like, how did you get it the same week I got it in California and New York? So, yeah. We just wanted to do a quick reminder on the event list. I know Susie mentioned we don't run all the events, so make sure you're checking our website. It has links for those events, but that event list is up there. And Susie, if you can go ahead and go to the next one. So Susie kind of briefly touched on this, but I am a professional development lead here at SMRC. I'm relatively new. I started last January. But as of last December, I was a chemistry teacher and a Science Olympiad coach. And then we left our teaching positions and my family moved here to Montana. And I started working at SMRC. So I feel where you're at. Some of you have coached longer than I have. Some of you are about the experience level I have. I think I coached for about 6 or 7 years for Science Olympiad. And I taught for about 10 or 15 years too. So lots of experience. And here to support you as a former coach and current coach supporter is what we're calling ourselves. So my goal really is to host some office hours, essentially to do a lot of the things that SO is doing, that my SO is doing on a national scale. We want to be supporting our Montana teachers and students locally as much as we can. We won't have all the answers, but I'll be hosting some office hours and informal check-ins. You can feel free to email me directly if you have like a coach specific question. Otherwise, it's probably best to direct all of your like programmatic logistic questions to the MTSO email, so the main email system. And then I'm going to hand it over to Addie to introduce herself.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Addie Rollman. I'm a sophomore here at MSU, but I used to be a former Science Olympiad competitor from Corvallis High School. So I did that for about, I think it was 3 years. I started my sophomore year, and then sophomore, junior, senior year, did a handful of events. Um, So yeah, now I've worked as the student intern for the Science Olympiad program for about a year now. I think I started last November. So I am also here just to answer questions, and I have the perspective of a former student, so uh, yeah, I can also help with questions related to coaches or to events or any of that as well. And you can also email me directly. My email is listed right there.
Great. Thanks, Addie.
Yeah.
Susie, if you can go to the next page. So in our role as coach supporters, we want to make sure that we give you a couple of heads ups about the tournament this year. So this tournament is going to be on a day with classes in session. I know it may have been a while since some of you came to a Science Olympiad event while classes were in session last year. Just as a reminder, in case you didn't know, the in-person one that we had last spring was actually on a day that the campus had classes off, and so that meant that, first of all, the rooms were not all full. There weren't a whole lot of college kids walking around. But this year, there's going to be a lot of college kids walking around, walking to classes and everything. But it also means that there may be more issues with space. So we're trying to plan ahead of that and know that there will be some logistical issues in terms of like getting places. But we wanted to give you a reminder and a heads up as well. Also along that lines, parking then is going to be a little bit tougher. So help us please, if you can, to pre-plan by sharing your route, how you're going to get here by bus, van, car, when you're registering your team. And we'll pop the registration links into the chat in a little bit. But please, if you can, let us know. If you don't know yet, but you find out in January that you're going to take a bus, that's fine. Feel free to email us at the MTSO, the main email. It'll just help us figure out how we can try to support you. And then we're hoping to provide a round of updates about floor surfaces. Addie and I literally sat with the rules manual and looked at, which events require specific floor surfaces, and we're trying to match that to rooms so that as soon as possible we can let you know if it'll be what kind of surface it'll be for things like wheeled vehicle and scrambler. So we're hoping that by January at the latest we can get you that sort of information. So, are there any questions? I see Sarah typed into the chat. Yeah, Sarah, thank you. Oh my gosh, for that recognition. Yes, it is. It's not just judges that it's going to be impacting as MSU students, but also MSU faculty members because they're going to be teaching as well, right? And so, yeah, it's impacting our recruitment for volunteers. In a way, it's really great because everybody will still be on campus. So that's awesome. But it might mean that, we have these students for this 3-hour block and then these students for that 3-hour block, and we might only get a 1-hour block out of students. So we're coordinating it and excited about it. Actually, I am really excited that your students will get to see college kids on campus. I think that's great. I just so you know, I always had my Science Olympiads were always on a Saturday, so there were never college kids around. So I'm like, oh my gosh, the Science Olympiad students are going to see real college students. That's cool to me. So I'm excited, but it also presents some challenges on a few levels. So great question, though. Will there still be tours? Yay! Oh my goodness, Susie and I were just talking about this today. Yes, we are definitely going to be hosting some tours. We were talking about ways that we can make it really engaging. Actually, Susie, if you want, you can move on to the next slide because that's kind of related to what's on the next slide. So we want to check in with you all. In the chat, you can unmute if you want to. And one of the things that we want to know is like, how do you handle hotel accommodations? Are you typically like reserving from the room block? Do you handle it on your own? Like, is there anything we can do as coach supporters to like get you extra information or anything like that? And then what sort of like extra surroundings do you do? Do you love those tours? Do you love the Museum of the Rockies night? Do you like going on your own over somewhere else unique? And let us know how we can help you as coach supporters for that. So Sarah, thank you for calling out the tours because that was on our list of like, should we call it out specifically or just leave it broad? We left it broad, but just so you know, we are planning for it. And we're talking about getting student panels involved, trying to do some creative stuff with the tours. So
That's great. Can you guys hear me yet?
yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I would just, in the only other thing I wanted to bring up was that in the years past, we've always struggled with the award ceremony because we try to get our students, because we are a local school, we try to get our students back in time for anybody that needs to ride the bus. And if we join with our middle school team for transportation, that's really critical. It's not quite as critical for our high school students, but we oftentimes have to leave before the award ceremony happens in order to get our students back to go on the bus. So I'm sure there's a limited number of schools that struggle with that. But there might be some, I suppose, that are far away that have to leave early to try and get home that night as well. So that would be one of my just things that we've talked about in the past as being something that's kind of a disappointment for some of our students.
And Sarah, I can address that just for a minute. I did notice that last year's awards ceremony went faster now that we're using the Sci Olympiad software. I know I can't promise that we'll be done in time for you to get back before school's out. I think some of our other teams, I mean, everybody wants that to go fast because some of our teams have to drive 5-6 hours to get home. I do think it went faster. We're going to try to do everything we can to make it super efficient. Because yeah, I think by that time people are just ready to get the awards and head home. And we always will mail medals to people. If you have to leave early, your kids will definitely get the medals that they earned. So hopefully you can stay, but if you can't, we'll make sure the kids get their awards.
Yeah. The regional that I used to go to, our award ceremony was outside until about 6 or 7 p.m. And it was like, yes, very late. So Stephanie, that's a great question. One of the issues, and we're looking into this on a Sci Olympiad side, is we are trying to figure out if we can do that technically, if it's possible to allow that. So we're looking into it, and we will keep you updated. Susie, remind me, last year it was available immediately, right?
Yeah, I think that's what you're asking, Stephanie, right? Like if you log into Sci Olympiad, you can see all the scores, even though we haven't actually announced them.
Yeah, and you even posted them like on the wall in the back of the room, and it kind of just took away from the excitement of hearing because the kids would just be back there and then no. And I get it if you're trying to leave early, but I don't know if we're going to be there for the ceremony, somehow hold off on posting those.
Yeah, so if we had it in Sci Olympiad, which I'm not sure we can turn off, only the coaches are seeing that, right? Your kids are not
So
seeing
that's
it.
okay, yeah.
Okay, so don't post them on the wall. Yeah, we can do that. There's no problem there.
Yeah, I think the coaches can use, they can use their discretion. I mean, I think most coaches would agree it takes away from the excitement. So cool.
Yeah, I agree too. That's great feedback.
I agree with that, but we do have like a 6-hour bus ride home, so it was nice.
So then you just check out.
It was nice for us to be able to see if we needed to stick around or what time we could book out. So if we can see it, if the coaches can see it, that would be great. But I'd like to be able to check before we sit through and then have a later night.
Cool. Yeah, I think we can do both of those. We don't have to post it publicly, but you can still see online. I think that'll be no problem.
That'd be great.
Great. I actually really like that as a compromise. Great. Okay, we wanted to know, in the past, how do you all plan your like meetup spot? So how do you choose like ahead of time, hey, we're going to be in this area when we meet up, or do you just show up the day of?
When we've done it in the past, we've always kind of when we get there, we go into the ballroom and just kind of like claim a, a section of seats. And then that's kind of where everybody piles up their stuff. And then we try to just have that be our base camp. And then kids are coming and going from there. And that seems to work okay for us. But I'm open to suggestions or having it be slightly more organized.
Great. Yeah, Stephanie, that's what we were wondering. You go to the same place in the cafeteria each year. I'm imagining by the time we get there in the morning, there's not going to be a whole lot of MSU students. So that's probably not a huge deal, but just recognizing that throughout the day, especially at those meal times, there might be more MSU students in the cafeteria around. Again, not necessarily a problem for your students to see college kids around, but just being aware, is that something that you're still okay with? We're trying to plan out how we can get spaces for you creatively. Um, but we wanted to hear what you do. Okay, yeah, so ballroom and cafeteria. Great. Perfect. And then we have a couple of kind of bigger picture questions that we wanted to check in on. We've had at least one person ask about it, so we wanted to throw it out to everyone. Would any of you be interested in, or you think your school or district would be interested in a Division A elementary school program? It wouldn't be able to happen on March 8th this year, right? But in the future, it's definitely something we all love the idea of. So we just wanted to gauge how many of you are ready to go. Like you would get started this semester if you could. And yeah, as early as possible. Stephanie, are you sure you can't do one on March 8th? Are you positive? Like, there's no way. Yeah.
So our elementary school actually started their own like after school STEM project, and they just threw it together, not really, just jumping into it. So I think they're really excited to have some guidance and resources, but lots of kids are interested. So I was impressed to hear that. Yeah. So it's starting.
Yeah, I know my students they were doing outreach to the elementary schools and coaching other elementary schools. So my students were then the coach, which was super cool to see. So if that's something that you would love to do, that you are interested in, yeah, keep us in the loop and let us know. We will probably reach out with more details. It's not going to happen March 8th, I can tell you. It's just not. But we do have that on our list of things. The next question we have is actually about invitationals. So we would love to add to the slate of activities students can do in Science Olympiad instead of just having the one state tournament. Maybe having an invitational that happens in the fall. It could be a regional invitational, it could be an online invitational. We're just throwing it out there to see if you all have looked into invitationals before, if you've done any, if you have any interest. I know we did online invitationals, and in order to do that, we had to create tests. Like if you signed in for the invitational, you created a test, and a bunch of other coaches also signed up, and they would create tests. So it was like not perfect because the coaches are creating the test that the students will take, but it's an invitational. It's fun, and students enjoyed it. There are a couple of online national invitationals, and so I'm wondering, have you done any of the online national ones? Are you interested in a regional invitational? Would you be interested in an online Montana invitational? What are your thoughts on invitationals?
I found out about invitationals for the first time this year. And I was kind of bummed to see that we don't have any close to us. 'Cause my kids would love to go into an invitational, in the fall or even the early, January, February. We are looking, I think there was one that we can do remotely for February 4th. And I have my students interested in doing that. So we might try it for the first time this year, but it would be awesome if we could have somebody more local host one.
Yeah. And honestly, there's just logistically it can't happen at MSU. Like I would love for it to, but it's just not possible. But if we will definitely support you all if you wanted to host it regionally or locally because it's something that really helped my students. We actually we did an invitational in I want to say it was like October, and you had to try out for the invitational and then try out again for the regional tournament. And most of the students who made it to the invitational made it to the regional, but you weren't guaranteed. And there was like, I didn't make it to the invitational team. I'm going to study real hard and make it to the regional. And there were some people who didn't score high enough because they coasted after the invitational. And for me as a coach, that was awesome to see in a way, because it was like that extra little bit of motivation. Um, Heidi, that would be totally up to you. I would encourage that. I would say that what would happen is, you know, the minute that here at MTSO we announce the events, then whoever's interested in working through this invitational, you just collaborate to create what it would look like. And so you might have the date chosen ahead of time, but not necessarily the events until MTSO releases the events. And it is, in terms of a coach, it's not difficult. You're making a test, and if as long as there are, you know, enough people to where you can get 5 or 6 teams, then you're making maybe 2 tests, and then you cover all of it. Um, you might choose to do the builds, you might choose not to do the builds. It just depends on how financially you want it to work. I know the build events for us were obviously the most expensive ones, so we could afford to do anything that had a lot of balsa wood. But Mission Possible, when we were doing Mission Possible, we probably wouldn't have made a Mission Possible box twice because it just was too much, right? But any of those balsa wood competitions, we'd do multiple times. I can't even tell you how many bridges we built. So yeah, but I like that idea of keeping it as close as you can. And as an invitational, you technically have a lot of flexibility. Oh my gosh, that's so cool, Sarah. That's amazing. My tryouts did not look like a in-house competition. My tryouts were unique and silly, but I would definitely not say that we had our own in-house competition. But that is cool.
It's just because there's like, everybody wants to build a bridge. And so it's kind of like you just kind of weed it out, and then you're like, oh, well, your bridge didn't work. So let's work on forensics or whatever. So
yeah, got it. That's funny. Bridge was never super popular for me, but anatomy physiology. Is that all you two? Like, I have 15 kids want to do anatomy physiology. And I was like, and that was my degree. So I totally understand. And I fully supported them. And I was like, that's okay. I love physiology too. But we can't all do that one. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let us know. Feel free to reach out if you have more questions, comments from like a coaching perspective. Susie, if you could share the screen again,
Yeah,
I can
Jeannie,
share mine.
actually, I wanted to ask really quickly. We got behind this year on reserving hotel blocks in Bozeman. And again, if you've tried to stay in a hotel in Bozeman, it's not such a great scene. Is that helpful when we can get a block of rooms, or are you finding your own way, or what can we do that's most helpful for you?
I think if there was a block, we would certainly look into it because it was pretty expensive last year.
Yeah. Okay,
to,
cool.
to do it ourselves. So
yeah, okay, we'll definitely do that. We just got behind, we kind of got off schedule when we moved to the spring. But yeah, we will definitely have some options for you.
if it's okay, I would like to ask a question of anybody. Vanessa, I know like at Hamilton has a really strong tradition, I guess, of the Science Olympiad and lots of kids. So how do you go about recruiting kids and having them be engaged to practice? And since we're just starting out, we don't have the tradition behind us. So what do you have any ideas? Anybody have any ideas for how to best recruit kids for we'd like to try to get 2 teams, a JV and a varsity this year.
So I think a lot of our success and interest is built in the middle school. So Stephanie DiBiasio's on here, and she gets those kids pretty psyched. In fact, I think she said she has like 45 kids interested in middle school this year, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and they're not as busy at that point. So,
and I think that early exposure is really important.
Okay.
And then once kids get into high school, some kids have already done it. They know what to expect, and they kind of they help recruit other kids,
Okay.
which is great. I think, yeah, I don't know. I feel like Stephanie might be a better one to talk to about that. Sorry for putting you on the spot, Stephanie.
Well, I think we don't have, our sixth graders don't do sports except for track. So there's really not as many options in sixth grade. So we hook them pretty early and just try to focus on how much fun it is. And we, like, since we have so many JV kids this year, I'm just emphasizing this is the experience, no pressure, have fun. And we try to make the practices really fun. Like we make popcorn every practice, and I don't actually know how much we get done. And so, yeah, so we just promote the fun part of it. And then it's interesting. Those kids who start in sixth grade will continue on, but if you don't get them early, I think it's hard to keep them. And then if we have that elementary program start, I think that'll just help our middle school have more interest and more quality interest too. So.
Okay.
I will
And
say, so
do you
I
guys
was
start
in,
your, oh, I'm sorry. Do
oh
you
no,
guys start your practicing like at the beginning of school year, or when do you really start rolling?
I think I don't know about you, Vanessa, but our first real practice isn't until next week. So
Okay.
we're at the middle school level.
Right.
We had our first practice yesterday.
Okay.
And so I don't know. We only meet once a week for these first few practices. I put a lot of it on the kids, but I try to keep it really organized. I give them all binders, their events. I tell them for the first several practices, you know, and what helps here is we have a lot of buy-in with our community. So I've got 2 assistant coaches.
Okay.
I think as being a coach, a head coach by yourself with 15 or 14 events is super overwhelming to try to really get to know all those events, all those parameters. And I'm able to kind of push things onto my assistant coaches. So we divide up the events. They have 3 or 4 events that they are the main coach for with those kids. And so they meet with them at every practice and check in with them, help them. We use a lot of tests off of the National Science Olympiad site to practice once we get to that point. And I don't know, I try to have a really focused, organized practice where they're meeting those goals.
Okay.
That helps.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Appreciate that.
I'll just pop in because I was in the same position 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. We didn't have a Science Olympiad, so I started it on the campus. And honestly, I started during the off seasons. Like I would start now, making everything visible. Like literally every build event happened outside of my classroom. So we did catapults in the middle of the quad, and we were doing helicopters everywhere we could, just to get it like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that you're launching? And it got students to think about, oh, well, what's that's happening? I was tucked over in the corner of campus. I was like across from PE fields, and I was not at all visible. So we had to make ourselves visible. We also we created a maker space so that they could be doing stuff after Science Olympiad was done. And it was, I mean, even just silly stuff that really wasn't necessarily about the competition, but about the same experiences. And it got the conversation to be happening across the campus. Like it took some really intentional getting out there physically to show students what we were doing. And then honestly, my chemistry classroom was full of Science Olympiad stuff. It was like I had my protein models out and about. Like I think I ended up with more Science Olympiad stuff on my walls than I did chemistry stuff on my walls. Like sure, I had a big periodic table, but we had a couple of 3D printers, and I would have them going in class a couple of times so that students would get that. Oh, what is that? Oh, what is that? And just conversations, getting them going. The student word of mouth. So, yeah. And then it kind of debunks the idea of what science is, that it's only in, a lab setting and that it's not collaborative. What I love about Science Olympiad is how collaborative it is. So when you see groups of students standing around looking at a rocket launcher or something like that, whatever it is, they love it. When we did the parachute one was really fun outside. That would be get out there when you can. I mean, I know it's cold outside right now, so, but even if it's in a hallway, get out in the hallway and have them do one of the little, like scrambler or one of the wheeled vehicle activities, whatever it is that you can do, get them doing those types of things. Yeah, and I love getting the community involved. That's amazing. Yeah.
Jeannie, I'll pop back in here for these last couple items, and then we'll have more time for questions too at the end. Let me click over here.
So like Addie and I were saying, our goal is to actually offer open office hours. We can have discussions like this where if you want to talk about from a coach perspective, what were the successful things, what weren't the successful things, or if your students have questions and it's not necessarily a rules clarification, but it's like a I don't understand what this means thing. Addie and I are not experts on everything, but we will certainly try to help. And if we can't help immediately in the moment, we can try tracking down an answer if we can. But we will try to answer as much as we can live. She and I are pretty consistently grabbing that rules manual and coming back and forth and talking about it. So these are the dates, and I think we're going to publish them on the website as well. But we've planned out the dates for December and January, and we'll hope to have another set of office hours in February as well. So to feel as though you can come yourself, have a conversation like we're having right now, or send your students. We certainly don't mind that that ability. I know they had offered it at the regional that I took my students to, but you had to drive, and we didn't have a whole lot of money where I actually couldn't even drive the hour and a half to get to the in-person regional coaching session. So if you want, meet up virtually, we can try to do our best to help you out. Awesome. And then I think hopefully these links will work, and they did not work. Just kidding. Okay, so let
They
me
work for
click on
me.
them. They did. Okay.
I can post them in the website in just a second here. And I know some people on this call have already registered their teams, so thank you for doing that. We are working on getting our credit card payment option up and going. It's not quite up there yet, but we should have it soon, and we'll let everybody know.
Okay, then just as a heads up, we're going to try something new, sort of, potentially, with Sci Olympiad this year. We're going to have you register your students per event. So we're actually going to ask you to tell us which students are in which event. There's a few reasons for this. First, logistically, it helps us figure out those rooms since the rooms are going to be kind of unique. It's also going to help you. Every year, and I'm sure you've coached, so this has happened to you. We have students who don't put their names on the test or don't put their school number, and so we're trying to figure out, okay, well, who could this be? So if we know which 4 teams were taking the test and who they were, and we can like backtrack it, that'll be easier for us. And all of that is going to be facilitated if we know who is in which room at any given moment in time. So please help us out by doing that. And hopefully it won't be too much extra work. I think if I remember correctly, this is how we did it at the regional I was at. We actually did mark who was in which event so that the students actually logged in as well. But we're working on the logistics of Sci Olympiad a little bit still.
I'm going to mention, I think that's our last slide, right, Jeannie? I was going to mention one more thing. We tried something last year with doing the students have to sign a code of ethics. And I know that the way we did it left the coaches out of the loop because the students were filling it out directly, and then it came to us and you didn't know if they had signed it or not. So we're working on a new system because I know that's really, people were asking me, have my students signed? And I had, like 800 forms. So we're going to come up with a better system so you know which of your students have completed that. Yeah, we'll make that work. this time. And one last thing I wanted to share too, we've started using Constant Contact to share updates about Science Olympiad. What's cool about it is that people can unsubscribe and subscribe at any time, because it was getting hard to keep track of if people retire or somebody's new. The bummer is that it often goes to your junk mail. Like at MSU, I send one and it goes to my junk mail. So I just wanted to let you know to be on the lookout for those. I don't even know how else to tell you, but just that's what we're using because it's helpful for everybody, but you may not, you may have to search for it a little bit. So I think that's the end of everything we had to present to you. We're happy to take any questions. Oh, actually, I know somebody had asked a question about the forestry event. In the National Rules Manual, it discusses that students need to know all the national trees. We're not going to do that. We're going to do only Western trees, and we will post this on the website. There is an Audubon guide from 2021. Sorry, I forget which person asked me about this, but okay, yeah, the book that you mentioned is acceptable for a field guide because students can take one field guide in with them into that competition. And this field guide would work, but we'll only be doing trees that are in the West. We did find a specific Audubon guide for Western trees, but it was from 1980. So I want to buy that and check it out before I refer people to it. I don't think trees change that much, but that's really old. So I just want to check that out before I can recommend that as the field guide.
And then I just wanted to point out, Susie and I were actually looking at this earlier today. So I pulled up what the Audubon tree guide looks like. So if you haven't seen it, it is called out specifically in the rules manual, but I wanted to just give you the quick preview that we were looking at earlier, that this is what it actually will look like if you do purchase or want to purchase the field guide or the tree, and it's on Amazon. So just giving you a heads up.
I see the question about the mezzanine of the field house. It is unlikely this year. In some years it would work, but Bozeman is hosting the Class B basketball tournament that starts that next day. And they can't promise us that we can have that space because it might be being prepared for that basketball tournament, unfortunately.
And then Susie, I don't know if you saw Sarah's question, but it's phenomenal because I literally just saw a documentary that today listed in one of the events that I want to watch. So I'm like, yes, let's get some documentaries going. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, I like that
Right?
idea.
Yes.
Yeah, because we
Yeah.
could do that in one of the big rooms. Yeah, because I know
Yeah.
some of those talks and tours only have like 10 or 12 slots, and it's hard. You can't even fit an entire team sometimes. So yeah, that's a great idea to have a film
Yeah.
documentary in one of our bigger spaces. That's cool.
Oh, darn. That means I have to screen a bunch of documentaries now. Any other questions?
And I know you came in kind of later and were interested in elementary Science Olympiad, I think specifically. If you want to hang out with us a little bit after we've answered all the questions, we're happy to talk about that, or we can email about that too. Basically, we're investigating it as an option. I don't know that we would host the kind of tournament where everyone travels to Bozeman. I'm just not sure if that's feasible for elementary kids, but we can certainly look into that. But they have a lot of great materials where you can basically do it at your own school, and you can involve your high school and middle school Science Olympians in running that for the elementary kids, which would be super cool. In fact, we're about to come up on, I know today is Giving Tuesday. We're not part of that, but there's an MSU centric one that happens in February. Maybe that would be a good thing to raise money for, so we can support teams in getting those supplies at a free or reduced cost, so we can pilot that out in some of the schools. That'd be cool.
That would be great. I'd love to stay on for a minute and chat if you have time.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Okay, Diana asked a question about the small school category. Yes, it's an interesting question. And here is how I learned it from the people who have done Science Olympiad for 37 years at MSU. There's not an exact number because it could lead people to try to meet that number in a certain way. It's basically based on when we look at all the schools, we kind of look at a percentage of the schools that are small. It tends to be around 100 students. We never choose a number that, we don't choose 105 when there's a school that's 106. There's typically a pretty logical break. Often, there might be schools up to 110 students, and then the next biggest school is 180 students. So that's kind of the logical cutoff for the small schools. I know that's a little bit hard to roll with, but oh, and I see, if the school is K-12, do we count all students or just the students in your division? I would count the students in your division. Any other questions about logistics or events or anything? We'll be back before you know it on December 6th. So if you have any questions, you can always email us. We're mtsciolli@montana.edu. And yeah, just email us anytime. I'm Taylor@montana.edu. We'll make sure we get some answers for you. And we really appreciate everybody for being here today and for being coaches. It's a big job, but super awesome. All righty. Well, if no more questions, we'll hang out with Anne. We'll see you in Bozeman in March, if not before. If you're here, if you happen to be here with some kids, be sure to let us know. We'll come say hi. Cool. Thank you.